So, Jane, what is a proportionate response right now to the cluster of 13?
Well, I think we've seen what a proportionate response looks like in other states. New South Wales, WA, Queensland have all had these limited lockdown periods that have allowed the contact tracing to catch up, have allowed the testing processes to catch up, and that has allowed life to go on as normal for as long as possible. And I think that that's what the Prime Minister means by a proportionate response, but we'll wait to hear from the state government. But he's right, we've done this before. I don't think that this is cause for alarm from Victorians. We want to make sure that, we understand that it's quite traumatic. Those lockdowns last year were really hard going on very many people, and we don't want to see that happen again.
Yeah, we don't want to see that happen again. And I think one of the things that we've learned from the way states have responded to COVID outbreaks is that if you delay, things can get more and more problematic. And I think, we've all learned that hard lesson over the last year or so. But, as for what a proportionate response looks like, honestly, I like to leave that up to the medical experts. We've got amazing medical practitioners, doctors around Australia who are advising our state and federal governments. And I think they're, really well placed at this stage to tell us when we need to take that quite dramatic step of locking down the state for a few days, and when we actually feel like we're on top of the contact tracing enough to continue to remain open. And I think we'll see some results out of Victoria today that will give us a really good indication of which of those is the right solution.
Do we need to, stop talking about learning lessons, Claire, and just have learnt the lessons? I mean, this seems to have been kicked off by a nebuliser, which every medical expert says is a crazy thing to have in hotel quarantine. Somehow it was allowed to be used.
I mean, Tom, we've got a disease here that's evolving itself, and I think every country in the world is adapting its methodologies for keeping COVID under control. And I have to say, I'm incredibly proud of the work that's being done here by state governments, in particular by the Victorian state government after the awful outbreak that we had here kind of in the middle of last year. So, of course, we're continuing to learn because the virus itself is continuing to change. And I think we are getting to a point where we can see that often these shorter, sharper lockdowns earlier on are, dramatically preferable to a longer period of time where we see, significant economic impacts for the families that Jane and I represent in Parliament. So I actually think, adaptability is the key here, and to see state governments talking to each other, learning from each other, and getting to, better and better practice all the time is actually what we need to see. And the truth is, Tom, even the Health Minister will say this, we're going to get vaccinated throughout 2021, but COVID's not going away. We are going to have to live with this virus for probably many years. We're not going to see the rest of the globe, the 7 billion people around the world, fully vaccinated at the same rate as Australians. So I just think this is a watching and a learning process that we're just working through really well as a country.
So I'll just end on this one with you, Jane, but do you agree with that? What do you think voters are out there thinking? Well, COVID's difficult, this is a new variant, it's more contagious, fair enough, or some frustration, this is happening again in Melbourne?
Claire's right in that we will continue to learn from it. I mean, even as recent as 2 or 3 months ago, who would have thought that opening doors at the same time within a hotel might have passed on the virus, all through the ventilation systems in hotels. So we are learning and adapting as we go. I think that what we have seen, though, is that the efficacy of those short, sharp lockdowns in New South Wales, in Queensland and in Perth, so that we don't need to have that draconian lockdown that we had last year in Victoria in order to get on top of our contact tracking and tracing, the best news is, of course, reiterating the Prime Minister's message this morning, we are very much on track to start the vaccine rollout at the end of this month, and we are very close to that approval of the AstraZeneca vaccine as well. So there is cause for optimism, even though I can imagine the Victorians are a little bit white-knuckled at the moment.
Yeah, white-knuckled, and I think you're asking a fair question there, Tom, but let's remember, you prefer to be in Australia right now than any other country in the world, full stop. We're doing a really good job at this. This is a disease that no one else is managing better than our country. And I think most Australians that I talk to understand that. We're facing a pandemic that is just, people are dropping like flies in other countries in the world. And we've actually managed to keep this under control because of the adaptability of those state governments that are doing such a good job in fighting the virus.
0 deaths in January, I think, is something that both state and federal governments can be very proud of.
Well, there you go. We ended some furious agreement. We'll keep our viewers updated, of course, 11:45, the meeting.
For me and Jane.
It is, that meeting, and as soon as we learn more, we will let you know, so stay tuned.